Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 2 of The Midnight Suns, written by Brian Edward Hill. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. So with that said, this issue opens in the cold night air, with the blurry silhouette of Chicago Med Hospital looming ominously. Now the quiet corridors within are bathed in a sterile fluorescent glow, devoid of any human presence. But the stillness is shattered when a woman reaches her hand out towards a door. Now upon seeing her reflection, her surroundings started to blur as a tidal wave of blood crashed through the hallway and engulfed everything in its path. Now following that dream, Victoria awakens in her tent as her scream pierces the air. Tulip, her companion, quickly sprung into action with her gun drawn and aimed it at the perceived threat. "You good?" asks Victoria with her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Victoria nods with her breathing still heavy and says, "You're going to shoot me for having a nightmare?" With that question asked, Tulip lowered her weapon and said it's a force of habit when she wake up to a scream. So after Tulip apologized to Victoria, we then see Victoria's face overcome by worry. So with that look on her face, Tulip could tell it was more than just a normal nightmare. Which was completely right, so as Victoria's eyes narrowed, she went on to say that her nightmares usually come true. So with that said, we then jumped over to Victoria approaching Johnny Blaze as he was scrubbing away in a notebook, and once she was there, she asked Johnny if he had a minute before going to say that she was going to say something he may not care about, but deep down, she knows he should. So with Blaze's interest piqued, he answered and said, "Fair enough, go ahead," as he motioned for her to continue. So with that said, Victoria started to lay everything out, and said, "Before we face Blade, we need to go to a hospital in Chicago, because something very bad is about to happen there, something I need to stop. And if you don't want to listen to me, then I have to go on my own, tonight." Blaze's eyes narrowed, and after a brief pause he turned his book around and held up a sketch of Chicago Med Hospital and said, "You mean this hospital?" Now upon seeing the photo, Victoria nods and goes on to say, "You must have seen it too." So with that said, Danny walked up behind Victoria and joined in the conversation and said he saw it too. So with this vision now being proven to be more than an isolated event, Danny continued to state, "So what? We're going to give killing our friend a break and see what this dream is all about." Now following that, Victoria stood firm as Blaze spoke up and said, "So we're being drawn to a place by a vision of something that seems completely separate from our goals. Which means, whatever this is, must be central to whatever we need to do, right? Isn't that usually how it works?" He then takes a swig from his beer bottle and allowed the clink of glass to break the tension. So with everyone in agreement, Blaze raised his bottle and said, "I'll tell the pilot." Now following that, we jump over to Springfield, Illinois, at the very same hospital everyone has seen in their dreams. And when we get there, we see a nurse tuck in a young patient and said she was going to turn the light off because the patient needed to get some sleep. So as that was going on, the child looked up with fear in her eyes and replied with, "The news was saying Spider-Man is a vampire now." Now this nurse quickly shot that down by answering her with, "Spider-Man is there to protect us." So with that matter settled, the nurse then went on to tell her to get some sleep. So as soon as she steps out into the hallway, the nurse was startled by a man staggering towards her, his clothes drenched in blood. And in a sinister voice, the man called out to the nurse for help and slowly removed his hood. And within seconds, the man looked up with his eyes bloodshot red and continued to say, "I have so much pain inside me and I want to share it with you." And with that said, the man started to transform. Now his transformation was swift and horrifying, so with his fangs bared and eyes glowing red, the nurse's scream echoed through the corridors, blending with the screech of the vampire's claws against the tiles. So just as he is about to strike, a fiery motorcycle crashes through the doors, ridden by none other than Ghost Rider. Now his chain quickly wraps around the vampire and its flames licked at its flesh as it writhes in agony. "Are you okay, miss?" asks Johnny Blaze as he arrives on the scene flanked by his team. Now with her attention on him, Johnny went on to say, "The one with the flaming skull is the good guy, and you're safe now." Now the nurse, still trembling, could barely comprehend what she's witnessing. So with concern in her voice, she asked, "Who are you people?" To which Johnny Blaze steps forward and answers with, "He's what punishes the things that deserve it." So after the Ghost Rider stared into the vampire's eyes, we fast forward a little bit later, in the hospital cafeteria with the nurse sitting with the team with a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. And after she took a brief second to process everything, she asked, "You all had a dream of this place?" To which Victoria nods and said that dreams are often just another plane of reality because existence is just a series of realms stacked on top of one another. Sometimes they bleed into each other. The nurse sighed as her grip tightened on the cup and said, "Things have been happening here for a while." Now this caught their attention, which prompted them to ask what kind of things. To which the nurse continued to say, "People have reported to see shadows and hear noises. And in fact, they also had a patient disappear a year ago and vanish in thin air." And to be honest, she never gave it all much thought until tonight. So with that said, the nurse's voice tightened as she thought about what the young child said earlier and asked if Spider-Man was really a vampire. To which Blaze smiled sadly and said, "We were on our way to kill our friend who might be evil now. Then we all had a nightmare and came here. So probably, yeah. We're here to help. I'm sorry about your friend," the nurse whispers. So with that said, Victoria stood with determination in her eyes and suddenly said, "I think I know why we're here and I need a knife to prove it." Suddenly, the window shatters and Blade crashes into the room with his swords drawn and eyes glowing with fury. The sound of falling glass echoed through the room as it landed. "Blade, don't," cried Johnny, but unfortunately, Blade was beyond reason. So in an attempt to stop the enemy before him, Johnny opened fire as the room erupts into chaos once more. Now Victoria and the others scrambled to protect the nurse while Johnny and Blade faced off. Once again Victoria shouted for Blade to stop, but her words were drowned out by the fighting. So in a final desperate move, Johnny fires another shot, and Blade is thrown back into the window before transforming into a swarm of bats that escape through the broken glass. Now following that, the room falls silent and the only sound is the heavy breathing of the exhausted group. "Worst shift ever," mutters the nurse, as she collapses into a chair. So with that said, Victoria's turned to Johnny to make sure that was truly Blade and not anyone else. Because at this point in the story, they are unaware that Varney, the first vampire, actually possesses him. So getting back to the story, Victoria states she don't know. Now with uncertainty in the air, Danny states that he can become the rider and follow him, because the rider should still have his scent. But strangely enough, Victoria shakes her head and replies with no because he was only trying to distract them and prevent them from staying there. Now she goes on to say that they need to stay there because they need to close an open door that is located in the hospital, a door that has awakened. A sleeper of hell. Now following that, on the last page, we see a glowing pentagram forms on the floor, pulsing with dark energy. So with that said, issue number 2 of the Midnight Suns comes to an end. Now, when it comes to this tie-in, I have to say I'm a little upset with it so far, because I don't see how this ties in with the bigger story. Which to me is pretty bad, considering these are the people Blade deals with the most. But I am willing to trust the process and see how everything plays out, because when I first heard about this story, I assumed this tie-in would play more on Blade's close connections and maybe show us the moment he was taken over by Varney. But instead, we are just focusing on a gateway in the hospital, now again. I'm willing to trust the process and hope that they can turn this issue around. Now with that out there, if you want to stay in the loop about any individual storyline, then how about you hop over to the playlist section down below or in the link cards above to get all caught up on the Blood Hunt event. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.